to order. First of all, I'd like to welcome Ops for his first attendance of this meeting. Is there any addition to the agenda? Michael?
Yes, thank you to the chair. I'd like to add just two brief items I'd like to ask about and perhaps a referral. One of them is about blackberry trimming along city pathways and trails. So blackberry cutting.
Okay.
And then my second one is related to public washroom signage.
Okay, good. So
that's it. Thanks.
Okay, so I put it under 10A and B. Okay, do I have a motion for the minutes? Move. Second question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Next meeting will be July 20th, 2021. And motion to adopt the agenda. Move. Second. Those in question. Those in favor. Okay, motion carry. So item number 1, report back on the traffic bylaws. Anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have anything to add to the report, and staff are available to answer any questions.
We received
questions. Oh, Michael?
Thank you. Yes, through the chair to staff, just two areas of interest on this one. Mainly regarding the engine brake component to this report back. So I read that there hasn't been any RCMP engine brake enforcement, therefore no data statistics to go on. Is that something? Do we know that they would, like, if they were doing a speed check, if they heard it, do they leave it because they're only doing speed checks, or is it something that as they're driving, if they hear it, a traffic enforcement officer would address it, or is it only when they set up for it? Do we know that? Because do they have to check the sound decibels or?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we do have RCMP staff on this call. I defer to them to answer the question. They may have a potential answer for you.
Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf. Normally, that type of enforcement is done from a stationary position. So if they were doing speed, checking vehicles for speed, it wouldn't be convenient for them to deal with a vehicle that's going in the opposite direction. So normally there's some sort of setup done to address that type of enforcement.
Great, I appreciate that. Then I'll just comment then further. The main place that I've heard it, and I can hear it almost every other night, on Westminster Highway. So I can also hear it on Highway 91 out near Hamilton, overpasses and all that, getting to the Queensboro and Alex Fraser. But you do hear it because the same trucks that are going to the highway or coming off the highway, they're still in the habit of using it. So I guess another question from this was, where are there signage that the city now has the engine brake regulation? Was there any signage put up, or was it not for the first year here because it was a bit of a trial? Because if signage could be put up, I think around the Hamilton area, because there's a lot of industrial areas and traffic coming from Queensboro, and it's a lot of the same trucks you see every night that get to the bump in the road on Westminster Highway and have to slam on the brakes, so then they use the Jake brakes to assist that. So is there signage anywhere for no engine brakes?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, staff have installed engine brake restriction signage across the city at certain points, mainly on the entryways into the city and along the boundary. We can certainly review the area that you've described, and if additional signage is required, we can install.
Okay.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. That was all for this item. Thanks so much, through the chair.
Linda. Linda, do you have a question?
No, it was something to add to the agenda, but I'll ask it under the manager's report. Thanks.
Okay, good. So, there's a recommendation from staff for receiving this for information. Do I have a mover? Second, call the question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Item number 2, proposed e-scooter pilot project. Staff, anything to add to the report?
Mr. Chair, I do not have anything to add to the report and happy to answer any questions.
So, any questions? Carol?
Thank you very much. So I was noticing that the scooters are considered a good supplementary to the bus riders because that last mile can be a long ways to go. So are the scooters foldable and are they allowed on the buses?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, staff are currently working with TransLink as they do not have policy with respect to e-scooters at this time explicitly defined. We believe so far in our discussions that upright e-scooters are not permitted on the transit system, but the foldable ones can be considered as luggage. But we are waiting confirmation from TransLink on that matter.
Maybe we could get a memo on that when you get that, please. Thank you.
Okay, Andy?
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for the report. It was very informative. Just a couple of comments on the pilot regulations, I think, from the province table 1 on page 16. Those seem very sensible, and I may have missed it, but I hope that when we're finished, we'll include the provision in that table that scooters ride on the right-hand side, as is currently required for bicycles and everything, as you know, under the Motor Vehicle Act. And thanks.
Okay. Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair, just two questions, both from page PWT 18. At the top of that page 18 or 5 of the report, it talks about the maximum speed limit and that the city would be recommending in this report 20 kilometers an hour, where the province limit is 24. Do we know, is 20 consistent with other municipalities as they're just getting into this pilot phase as well? Does 20 seem to be kind of the going choice for municipalities?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, staff's research has indicated that 20 kilometers per hour has been used in other municipalities in Canada. We feel that the 20 kilometers per hour is more in line with the typical operating speed of a pedal bike.
Okay. And then I think through the chair to follow up, and then my next question. I know working with e-scooter service providers, I've been told they can really easily limit what the scooters can do. And so the user of the day can't adjust it to go faster. But I guess the issue is how to deal with the other scooters that we'll soon see within the mix of an e-scooter service provider. So to help them ensure that they're keeping to the 20 as well. My second question on that page relates to the safety key factors there. And the first one on lack of helmet use, that was, I guess, flagged as a Vancouver Coastal Health concern. Could you just briefly elaborate on what would be the law around requiring helmet use, and would it be different for people who are using service provider equipment or their own? I'm assuming it would all be the same, but the challenge would be how would you track or charge someone? Whereas if they were using their own, there might not be a tracker on, so we won't know who's where when. But the service provider one, I believe, the company would always know where their scooters are, so they could know who is not wearing the helmet, kind of thing. Would there be? Do you have any language around what the requirement would be for helmet use?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the law requires helmet use for any rider on an e-scooter, regardless of it being personal or part of a shared service. We will work through the potential third-party supplier as part of the RFP that's been issued for a shared system to develop mechanisms, incentives, penalties to ensure that cyclists for that program are wearing the appropriate attire, including the helmet. For personal use, staff will be providing education and information on the city's website and working with our communications team to get the legal requirements of operation of these devices out there for public knowledge.
Great, thank you. Then just through the chair, a comment on that. I saw a person using a personal scooter today down River Road, and they did have a helmet on, but they were wearing all gray. They were really not standing out, and there's no side lane really for them to utilize there. So I think helmet enforcement is going to be really important from the beginning. So thank you.
Any further questions? Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you for the report through you to staff. And yeah, I certainly have seen a lot of them lately. The last couple of weekends, for sure, they've been out and about in Richmond. And I did have a question on the bottom of PWT 19 under public pathways include the Railway Greenway, the Middle Arm Greenway, and Imperial Landing Park. Does that mean they'll be able to go on the boardwalk at Imperial Landing?
Through the chair, e-scooters under the bylaw amendments would only be allowed to operate if the pathway has been signed as a shared facility for cyclists, e-scooters, and pedestrians.
So is that area going to be signed that way? Because
through the chair,
cyclists and pedestrians use that, and you know, on the weekends, it's really busy. I was there on Saturday night, and it was really, really busy. And so my concern really is for pedestrian safety.
Through the chair, we do have park staff that can provide further detail with respect to use of Imperial Landing.
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, we identified the 3 locations noted in the report as they were the 3 areas of shared use. That being said, this is intended to be a pilot, and we will have to monitor if there is conflict or challenge in those areas. And as noted as well, we will be doing additional signage in these areas as well.
Yeah, because my concern is there's areas around Imperial Landing, as you know, where cyclists have to dismount and then walk their bicycles, and that doesn't happen all the time. So I think, you know, education is going to be key, and enforcement, I guess, when necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexa?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you to staff. So I did also notice that you had some differing speeds, 20 kilometers within Richmond, 15 on things like the Railway Greenway. And so I'm wondering if this is sort of more aspirational versus operational, because, how are you letting people know in all these places? Are you going to have signage? When people come over the Canada line from Vancouver with their scooter, are you going to tell them, oh, by the way, it's a different pace here? Or is this more in terms of with the shared scooters?
Through the chair, the rules of the roadway, if you will apply for all e-scooter riders. Staff will work to get the communications out there in terms of education for where and how they can operate and at what speed. That would be supplemented with appropriate signage on the facilities with the lower operating speed as well. And we'll continue to monitor and make adjustments as required and work with our enforcement team to achieve those targets.
Okay. And then I noticed the same thing for 16 years of age. So obviously, you're not going to stop people going out and buying one for their 12-year-old. But so 16 is obviously in relation to the leased or shared scooters, I'm guessing.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, under the new provincial regulations, the minimum age of 16 years old is for anyone operating an electric scooter.
And so just thinking about some of the roads and things that you're permitting them on. So when you say a road has 50 kilometers an hour but a dotted line, so I think of Kingfisher, right where I live. So on my own street, I can't ride even though it's within the neighborhood and whatever else, or am I to walk it then somewhere? How do we get anywhere on these things is sort of what I'm wondering. Like it sounds like a good idea that we're limiting it on certain roads and things, but I think in true practicality, I think there's like, it's not that practical to say that we're not going to let it here, but we're going to let it there. Like if I lived over on Ryan Road, I would for sure want to rip through South Arm Park and get to the bus stop and then take the bus wherever, fold it up, take the bus wherever and go to the next place, right? So I think, when we're trying to think of the interconnectivity that we're trying to develop, I think, and for sure this is a good start, but I think when we start getting more into this, we're going to realize that we're trying to create more interconnectivity, right? We're going to allow people to come up the multi-use path on number 2 road, but then they get to Steveston Highway and there's no more bike paths. And now what are they going to do? Supposed to carry it then for the next half mile up to Williams? So I think we really need to consider the interconnectivity and the practicality around this. I think this is a great start. And I think the key is just how are we getting the information out to people and sharing that information and working with the school board. Because I think if we're wanting people to take an e-scooter to school instead of drive a car to school, they've got to be on board with it too, and they've got to, have some policies around it as well. So thank you.
Yes. Well, I think this is a very exciting project, and I can see that e-scooters are becoming more and more popular. I think in the last few weeks, I've seen lots of e-scooters on our roads, right? And I think with these new rules, people might have to adjust to it because right now they don't have any kind of rules. They just go anywhere they like. So I think it may take time and education and also enforcement to help people to understand that the new rules are in place and they have to follow the rules. And on the question of helmet, I think it's very important. But I also want to say that recently I've seen many bike riders not wearing helmets. I've seen a lot of that. So I think we have to strengthen enforcement both on the e-scooters and the bike riders. On the question about the monitoring. Now, I don't know whether or not staff will also be paying attention to the accidents that may involve e-scooters. Either they hit somebody or they hit themselves or they are being hit. So perhaps, in our future reporting, we should also keep our numbers of accidents that involve e-scooter. And I have a question to staff. In the recommendation, number 2, it seems to imply that, we have to get the permission or approval of the government, the provincial government, for this project, right? Is that true? So we still have to wait, after we pass all these bylaws, we still have to wait for the approval from the provincial government for the launching of the project.
Mr. Chair, that is correct. There is a bit of process to be considered as a pilot program to operate e-scooters legally within city limits, subject to council endorsement of the recommendations before you. The item will be added at a provincial cabinet meeting anticipated for July, and subject to cabinet approval, staff will bring back the bylaw amendments for council adoption.
So how soon do you think we will be able to get the approval? I'm thinking about the summertime, right? Again, we see lots of e-scooters going around. So the sooner the better if we can get the approval. So what do you think? How long will it take?
Mr. Chair, we understand from provincial staff that they are targeting the July provincial cabinet meeting.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is staff recommendation. Do you have a mover? Move second. Got a question? Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carry. Item number 3, update the George Massey Tunnel project. Anything to add to the report?
Yes, Mr. Chair. There was an announcement at 11 a.m. today from the province that the interim improvements, including a new decent interchange, are now funded. The announcement indicates the province issued a request for quotation for the decent interchange replacement today and plan to issue a request for proposals in the fall. The province is also in discussion with the federal government on cost sharing for the new crossing, and details will be announced when those discussions have completed.
Okay, good. Any questions? Carol?
Sorry, I was looking for my button. Okay, well, we've been waiting a really long time. I just want to congratulate staff. I know you've been keeping in close contact with the ministry, and that is great news. So if I understand correctly, the interchange at Easton and Highway 99 is approved, and now we go out to tender. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, they issued a request for quotation today, and once they have time to evaluate those, they anticipate going out for a request for proposals in the fall. And the project is funded. Yes.
Yeah, it is funded. Wonderful. That's great. Well, that's wonderful news. So I have a couple questions on that. It says in the CWT 31 that the new overpass just north of the overpass. Will they be demolishing the existing overpass?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I'm sorry I didn't hear that. Could you repeat your question, please?
Sorry. On CWT 31, it says that the new overpass will be it's just north of the existing overpass. Will you be demolishing the old overpass?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, my understanding is that they would construct. One option is to construct north of the existing so that the existing traffic is not disrupted for 3 of the lanes. Then when that is operational, demolish the existing to construct the additional 2. But that is still part of the request for proposal stage of the project, so we don't know for sure.
Okay, thank you. Now the next question I have is I'm looking at the interchange on, again, PWT 31, and it shows that the light will stay northbound exiting Highway 99, and there will be 2 dedicated lanes going westbound. Is there any way to have them consider putting in a cloverleaf so that the traffic would drive, under the overpass to a cloverleaf, come around, and then they can go east and west on Houston Highway, avoiding a light westbound?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, we haven't talked in details about the configuration. My understanding is that they're trying to minimize any land takes that they may need for any other design concepts.
I just want to point out that at the northeast corner, that farmland's already been destroyed. It was backfilled with a bunch of basically graveling garbage fills. So even if we did have to take a little bit of that land, it honest to God wouldn't be a loss. It's certainly never going to be farmed. I'd like to have further discussions about that. I really think that a cloverleaf is better designed. It's the original plan when the Massey Tunnel was built in the very first place. So I don't know where is the place that we would have that discussion, maybe with the minister or?
So sorry, my apologies. I didn't hear the last part, but we will meet with the ministry staff on this project and raise your concerns and comments to them.
Okay, because the original plan back in like 1950 or whatever was for a cloverleaf, and as you know, that's the bottleneck, is that light. So I really think that now is the time to talk about the option of a second cloverleaf. And the last thing I wanted to ask about was the pink line. So if you look at the city map, by the way, I'd love to have a better quality map because this is so tiny. I had to use a magnifying glass to try to see the writing. So where the gardens is a pink line. And it appears, looking through the magnifying glass, that the gardens itself will not be affected. It'll just be the area where the BC Hydro poles are. Am I right or wrong about that?
Through the chair, I believe you're correct. Yes.
Okay, that's good news. Yeah. And then the last thing was on number 30, page 37, we talk about the environmental review, that if it would be a 3-year review as opposed to a slightly shorter review for a bridge. Is there no way that the work already done, the environmental review already done, couldn't be applied to that to reduce that down to the same amount of time as the bridge review?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, that I can't answer that. We'll have to raise that with the ministry staff.
Okay, well, I'm looking really forward. And would you please send new maps that are like maybe printed properly? I tried online and you can't select just the map. So if you could just put in my package these maps with more clarity, please.
Okay.
Through the chair, yes.
Michael?
Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd also like a copy of those maps as well. I'm a big map user. Just a couple of questions or comments and then a question. I appreciate in the staff report on page 30 mentioning the safety and reliability improvements. And wow, what a world of difference when you went through with the LED lights on and what scrubbed walls and what have you. But it was night and day from going through the tunnel for my whole life. The next one was on page 34 there under the proposed environmental assessment certificate, and you it was in quotations there. There's 4 priority areas. Councillor Day spoke about the Steveston interchange, which I support the things that she suggested you have in discussion with staff on their end. But the other one I wanted to talk about was the Bridgeport on-ramp. So I think it's best shown on page 32. And the description up there in the report doesn't highlight anything about does this fit with what the city's land configuration and traffic pattern and multi-use trails? Does this meet what we hoped it would, and is it the priority that we need right now for this project? If there could be any further comments, I know I read the 2 paragraphs here above the photo on page 32, but I'd like to know, does this really fit with what we need in that area, because they're also quite a congested area. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, I think I can address that for Councillor Wolf. At the end of the day, this ramp will improve bus transit or transit in the area to through the existing tunnel and down the highway. So yes, it does fit with our transit-oriented future planning. And the land that it's on actually belongs to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, so it's actually not city land.
So then, just to follow up, then through chair, does where the pink line is, it says new multi-use path connecting to Patterson Road. So does that connect as we are hoping it would, or were we hoping it to be somewhere else in the vicinity?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf. Yeah, it fits. At the end of the day, the ministry is actually required to include cycling and other active transportation forms in their projects, which we're also getting on the Steveston overpass at the interchange as well. So they're required to include that in here, and what they've shown so far does work with our plan.
Any further questions? Linda?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This was my question that I was going to ask earlier, so I'm glad that Ms. Chan brought it up. And perhaps we can get a copy of the press release that the Ministry of Transportation put out today. It gives a really good explanation, and it is a multi-plan, like a multi-pronged approach. There is the interchange, there's the Highway 99 bus on shoulder lane extension, and transit and cycling improvements at Bridgeport Road and Highway 17, so quite extensive work. And I'm sure at some point in time, our staff will be involved in the planning of this, and we will be getting periodic updates, is my guess.
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, yes, we will.
All right, thanks very much.
Andy, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Thank you for the report. It was very informative. Just one quick question, because a lot of it has already been asked and answered. When I look at the map, for instance, on page 31, it has the yellow lines highlighting the road infrastructure improvements. So how much of that impacts Stevenson Highway and number 5 road, or is that part of the plan further down the road? Because that, in technical terms, is a gong show during rush hour. So does any of that impact that at all?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, no, we've been working with the province project team to ensure they stay within their jurisdiction.
Yeah, through the chair, if I can add something to that for Councillor Hobbs, the city does, we agree there's a lot of congestion in front of the Ironwood Plaza and such, trying to get into the tunnel. And we have a currently approved capital project to move forward later this year, early next year, to create some space to allow people that are going through to go through over the overpass to get over it. And so that'll be executed later this year or early next year.
Yeah, just one quick comment, because that makes sense. Although that's city property, those two things have to mesh and they have to be integrated well for it all to work. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, I think the announcement this morning is a good one and is welcome. And I believe that staff will work with the ministry staff for further information, right? Because there's lots of details that we still do not know. And regarding the tunnel replacement itself, I believe that it's very disappointing that we haven't been able to get more information from the ministry. And I also read from the newspaper that the city of Delta has the similar concern, right? And then there's a story today. I think one thing is really confusing in that in our report, in our staff report, staff mentioned that we have not been contacted or consulted by the Ministry of Transportation. But in the story in Delta, it was reported that the ministry staff said that they were in constant or regular contact or in consultation with municipal staff. So I don't know what do they mean, right? I mean, do they really have contact with us, consultation with us, or they're just saying that there was?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we are in constant communication with the project team on these issues. And what we're saying in the report is that there hasn't been any news on whether or not it's going to be a bridge or a tunnel option. While we've been talking to them, they just haven't had any news. And so I can't say what the article was meaning by that, but I can assure you that we talk to the project team very regularly.
Okay, great. So there's a staff recommendation for information. So move, second. So call a question. Those in favor, oppose, motion carry. Moving on, item number 5, electric vehicle adoption youth outreach initiative. Suzanne, anything to add to the report?
Mr. Chair, I have nothing to add. I would just note that you mentioned item 5 and item 4 is, we have not discussed that one as yet, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's go back to item 4. It's also
yes,
you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That is also me. We have nothing to add to this report, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, just a couple questions in the report and then 3 questions in the strategy. The question in the report is kind of in the moving forward list on page 42. There's just a couple of things I wanted to ask about there. Well, first, a comment. I really like the idea of having a virtual repair fair. I know right before the pandemic, that repair fair series was kicking off, and I was planning to go. And anyway, I can definitely visualize how to fix it series made by the City of Richmond that could be utilized far and wide and put into other languages and really be a great document. So perhaps that is how that will turn out. The other question I had on that same page is at the bottom of that section, it has an example of a C-bin technology. What is that? Have we piloted something like that before? Are we close to using that?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, it is something that we're taking a look at. It is basically a waste bin in the water. There is a fair bit to actually setting it up and making sure there's adequate flow and pumps and electricity for it to work. It's just a new technology that we're actually looking at and doing a bit of a business case and a project work around to see if it's something that we could potentially try. So it's brand new, something that we're looking at, not yet implemented.
Great. I'm really excited to learn more about that after reading this report. So if things could be shared with some of the work that staff are doing, when it's appropriate, I'd really like to hear about that. Now, related to this strategy, just a couple of questions. On page 53, which in the strategy page is 8, but for our package PWT is 53. It mentions a complete disaster debris plan as number 7 on the setting the goals. Could you just very briefly touch on this? I don't remember seeing that term before, a Richmond disaster debris management plan. So does that mean like a flood and water and contaminated water and garbage in that water? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wolf. Yes, it's basically a broad-scale plan for how we would manage debris in the event of any type of a disaster. It could be a flood, it could be an earthquake, any of those that we are working on identifying how we would manage that and putting it into a disaster debris plan.
Great. Again, that's something I'd really be happy to hear about and get further updates on that, or if there's a document that the staff has already developed, if that could be forwarded, I'd like to see where we've progressed on that and kind of the leadership we're taking. Thank you. My next question through the chair is related to page our package 70. That's page 25 of the strategy, and it's about the community cleanup events. I know there's not a big comparison here between other years, but I think that 93.5 youth volunteer hours is pretty low. I know there's some years when I was a youth doing garbage cleanup and invasive species removal, I did more than 100 hours in a year, no problem. Is that a really low number? And are we beyond the virtual ones listed above here? What other ways are we hoping to reach that population and get them back active? Do we have a strategy ready to go to when they're able to bring them back out and work with the Lower Mainland Green Team, which we have a service agreement for, and other methods?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, 2020 was a bit of a challenging year because of the COVID pandemic. So it was a bit lower than what we would traditionally have expected, but we will work with other areas throughout our organization, such as the Partnership Beautification and others to help support those initiatives on a broader scale in 2021 and beyond.
Terrific. Then, if I may, my final question or consideration is through the chair is in our package, page 101. It talks about the banned and hazardous materials, and I went through this procedure for the first time recently, where I had about a bag's worth of drywall that I punched out of a wall. I didn't punch it, sorry. I purposely removed it from the wall, and I had to get it to the Vancouver landfill. And I found that it was quite a challenge to get that done. So I went to the works yard and I talked to staff there, and I got other had to pay for other stickers and stuff I needed, but they couldn't provide the bags to put that hazardous waste in. And they assumed it would be at a local hardware store, and I had gone to all of them. So I think including in the strategy or ensuring that that the recycling hotline, they know where to go and what to get to put those products in. I've seen a number of construction projects underway right now where it's just piled up in the front yard, mixed debris, including drywall pieces, where I was extremely careful not to get any of that dust anywhere. And so I think that might be a needed improvement, as we've seen a lot of farmland illegal dumping of drywall products as well. I think increasing the awareness of the health hazards of it maybe is the first piece. So people, when they take it out, it goes right into a bag, and it doesn't have that intermediate stage or a no place to go kind of time. So thanks. That was it.
Thank you.
Carol?
Thank you. Just on that, thank you very much, Michael. So everybody knows, if anybody asks you, you can buy those yellow drywall bags at Rona over by the hospital. They're $3 each, and you have to double bag it and twist it and put a gooseneck on. Do the second one, gooseneck. So it is available in Richmond finally. For the longest time, you couldn't buy them anywhere, but now you can. Great report. I think my favorite page is on PWT 69 about the Food Fresh program. What an incredible success. I am absolutely thrilled that so much food was basically repurposed. Great to see that. On PWT 42, again, Michael mentioned the repair fair. Is it possible for people to take items that need repair from the recycling area, or once it's in the bin, it's untouchable?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, under our current protocols, once something is brought to the recycling depot, it does need to be handled and managed appropriately, and that does not include people being able to take those items.
That's too bad, because I read in page 61 that 141 tons of small appliances was recycled. It would be nice if there was a way for us to consider lightly used appliances maybe go on a shelf, and then if someone else wants to come along and take that, because I often put things out in front of my house and they're gone in like seriously under an hour every time.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Day, what we try to do with that is encourage residents to take lightly used materials and donate them to donation places throughout the city. We try to be a recycling facility and allow donation places to be able to use that to generate income for their, for their particular organization.
Could you follow up on that, Suzanne? That's a very good point. Could we have a sign that tells people, if your appliance is still working, please donate it to a charity so you can benefit the charity and someone else who can't afford to buy the same item brand new?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, we can definitely take that under advisement and look at putting that in at our recycling depot.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Andy?
Thank you, through the chair. First of all, the staff, just generally, that was a really incredible report for me to read through. I haven't really looked at that in that depth before, and just things with the renovations to the recycling depot and the increase in tonnage of 1,300 was pretty impressive. And again, I just want to make a comment that I made before to other people. Going to the recycling depot is always a joy because I think they might be the happiest staff in the city. No offense to any other staff, but they're so incredibly helpful and knowledgeable that it always makes it actually kind of fun going there, in addition to doing right by the things that you're disposing of or recycling. One of the things that I was also very happy to see in the report, among many impressive numbers, was the strategy number 6. I think it's page 53 of the report, and that's about the illegal dumping, particularly in farmland. And for me, that is a huge issue. I'm out there pretty much every day, and I know that it's a big issue for farmers and residents in that area. So I'm looking forward to seeing what some of the objectives might be to augment that strategy. I think there is some room to take some action in that regard with some of the stakeholders that are out in that community. So the other comment I just wanted to make, and it's perhaps a small question as well, when I look at, I think it's page 58, and the impressive number of over 79% when it comes to recycling with the single family homes, that's a pretty good number. But I noticed that the report also mentions a challenge in terms of working with multifamily homes. And to me, in some ways, it seems like working with a multifamily home would be easier because of the centralization of refuse and recycling material. But obviously, that's not the case. And so I wonder if you could just very briefly explain to me what your thoughts are on why multifamily homes are more of a challenge when I thought they'd actually be centralized and a little bit easier.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, part of what makes it difficult is that the city does not collect the garbage from multifamily. They contract for that privately in the dumpsters. So we do not get any information with respect to tonnage coming out of those facilities. From a recycling perspective, we are constantly working with the residents in multifamily because their contamination levels are quite high on the recycling. And so we're working on that as well. Those are a couple of the key challenges with the multifamily.
Very good. So any further questions? If not, is there a mover for the recommendation? Move, second. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now, item 5. Suzanne?
Yes, thank you. Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? Michael?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, just very briefly on this one. On page 110 of our package, it mentions that near the bottom there a electric vehicle like PowerPoint or presentation slide deck. And I'll just comment that I have used it, and some of my current students were part of putting it together, working citywide with the school district and city partners. And I think it was very successful and is really useful. That could be adapted to all sorts of areas of teaching and learning, and can be used independently. So I think it's a really fascinating document made by all those involved. I would just suggest that it would need to be to keep it a fresh document, because electronic vehicles are coming out so quick from every angle, that maybe gets an annual revision or a plan to get like an update on an annual basis. And then the cover page has the new year, so it includes the current models and the technology and charging stations to keep it relevant. And it would also keep the youth of the day contributing to it. So I think it's not going to be a document that's usable for a long time unless it's a fluid document. So thanks.
Very good. Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to staff. Well, thank you for the report. I think this is an excellent idea. As we know, young people really get this. And so I think, if we can get out to them with an educational program, I think it's wonderful. I did look at the video on Vimeo, and it was really funny and upbeat, and I thought it was really cool. And just wondering, are we going to get a report back and, next year on the uptake? Because I think that would be interesting to know, and any feedback.
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, it is our intention when we've rolled this out and beta tested it to turn it over to Plug-in BC. Should committee direct, we can report back if you wish.
I think it would be good to get some, what the participation rate was and any feedback from the users. I think it's always helpful. So, Mr. Chair, perhaps we could add that to the recommendation.
Yes. Okay, very good. Any further questions? So if not, okay, let's move the recommendation. And Linda, do you want to add the reporting back to the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, so with the addition that we would ask staff for an update after a year. Okay, so this move. Second, call the question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Item number 7. Anything to add to the report?
Hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Nothing further to add.
Okay.
I will just make a note. I'm not sure we went to number 6, item number 6.
Oh, I'm always ahead of myself today. Okay, item number 6. I'm sorry. Help Cities Lead Initiative.
Mr. Chair, staff have nothing further to add and are available for questions.
Okay. Michael?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to staff, I just have a couple of questions, or one question relates to two different pages. So on page 116 and 117, it's the area where you're talking about the regulatory and program actions for the building sector. And it mentions in that first paragraph there for GHG emissions of existing buildings, it mentions in there enabling them to regulate GHG emissions from the existing building. I'm just, perhaps you could elaborate on the how for existing buildings, how that the power could be delegated to local government. So what is the power that we're seeking? Maybe I'll leave that as the first question.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf. Currently, for existing buildings, there is no direct way to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from existing buildings. So one of the key asks in the Help Cities Lead initiative is for the province to provide that. And basically, the mechanism to provide that would be through what's called a building alteration code, which the province is already, working with to develop, with the goal to have that ready by 2024. So local governments have been advocating to have not only energy targets included in that alterations code, but also greenhouse gas emission intensity limits that would be set.
Excellent. Thank you. Very detailed question on point. My second question.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just add to that. My apologies, Councillor Wolf. Just as an additional response there, certainly the existing buildings are a challenge, but just wanted to point out that further expansion of and continued expansion of our district energy system long-term has a strategy of really being able to connect in those existing buildings. Once we hit a critical mass and we're within a year or two of potentially starting construction on our new sewage heat recovery plant in the Oval Village area, once we get pieces of infrastructure like that in place, it becomes a lot easier and more cost-effective for those existing buildings to tie into that system and really achieve some huge GHG reductions. So that is a longer-term objective of building out our district energy system, that once it achieves that broader spread, then it becomes very cost-effective for those older existing buildings to hook in.
Great. I thank you through the chair. I appreciate staff's the tag team there. I like the long-term approach as well as the nitty-gritty, what we got to get down to. Second question on the next page, 117, talks at the top there about regulating GHG emissions for new buildings, but nowhere in there do I see mention of banning natural gas hookups for new buildings. I know that's something contemplated by our neighbor to the north, and strategies around the world to not have new buildings hooked up to natural gas in the first place. You don't need to have that infrastructure if you have electric options. So I'm not sure if that does fit into what was described in this section, or not. Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the broad strategy with respect to Help Cities Lead is to propose regulatory enhancements to local governments that they could achieve their greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. So least path of resistance, in a sense, would be to establish at least basic greenhouse gas emission intensity limits for new buildings. And so that's underway right now with some work that's being conducted by the province through the Energy Step Code Council and subcommittees. Richmond as well, Richmond staff are well represented on those subcommittees, both Part 9 and Part 3, along with other local governments and the private sector, UDI, home builders associations, etc., to kind of look at the research that's coming out of that. That's going to proceed into the fall, and the hope is, and it seems like we're heading in that direction, is that proposed targets, emission targets, would be in the 2022 BC Building Code, and also potentially tied into the step code levels themselves. So more to come on that one.
Okay, good. Any further questions? Okay, Alexa?
Hi, thank you. Thank you to staff for this. I appreciate this. There's a lot going on here. It seems to me that we've got rules, and they can go to a relaxed step code if they hook into our district energy utility. And so, but we don't really have built into that an incentive to build better. So like, there is the technology out there to build a passive house, like multi-story building, that sort of thing. But, understandably, it's quite a bit more expensive. And so when we consider it, we haven't created that incentive yet. And is it because there's some, sort of conflict between getting everyone onto an efficient district energy utility, or just building better in the first place so that they don't need as much in the first place? Like, don't we want everyone to just build better?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, yes, Councillor, we want all new buildings to strive higher, and we're doing that with the step code performance levels incrementing up. With as Council OCP direction was by 2025, all buildings will be at the top level of the BC Energy step code. What we've been using the low carbon energy system relaxation is to incent low carbon energy systems, likely heat pump-based systems in independent buildings that aren't connected to district energy, and to reward buildings that connect to district energy with that one-step relaxation. If we get the greenhouse gas emission intensity limits directly in the code, we can rethink the whole low carbon energy system approach to incentivizing and just set a direct target and just allow industry time to respond to that. But overall, in terms of passive house, top level of the step code, completely net zero energy ready buildings, these are definitely actions that are within the new community energy emissions plan, which we now are aiming to bring in front of council for consideration this fall. Our first step in that direction was through a council referral to look at passive house level performance for single detached and duplex houses. So we brought that zoning bylaw proposed amendments, which were adopted by council this year. There's more work to be done on that space, so we're hoping to continue that, obviously, as we go into implementation next year.
Okay, but if there was a developer wanting to come forward with like a passive house, multi-story cement concrete condo, there's no incentive in place for it. They'd have to try to finagle it as the best they could, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, at this point, no direct incentives, but there is consideration of potentially looking at relaxation maybe in the space heat requirement versus the domestic hot water. It depends on the performance characteristics of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Andy?
Thank you, through the chair. Well, just a couple of comments and a question. First, the comments, the report again was very impressive. Some of the numbers in there were quite astonishing, like building space and heating for water being the third highest source of pollution, and the achievable 60% reduction in pollution simply by retrofitting 3% of existing buildings in the current building stock. Those are amazing numbers. Just a question on the 5 areas of delegation being sought by the province for authority for the cities. And it is interesting when you look around the world, and North America in particular, how cities are beginning to be the leading level of government on so many different issues, not just this issue. So the report is interesting in that respect too, because it comes from a different angle from some of the other things that I'm familiar with. But the question is, so progress on this initiative for delegating those 5 areas, what's your expectation regarding any timeline? Do you have any idea? Like, has the reception been positive, neutral, or is there a lot still to do? Because to me, one of the complicating factors might be the differences in municipal capacity between different cities. Vancouver is one case, Richmond's another. Prince George or Kelowna might be in a totally different situation. And we're asking for delegation of provincial authority, I imagine, across the province. So what are your expectations in that regard? Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, yes, Councillor, there's been a lot of discussion at the local government level in terms of the proposals in the Help Cities Lead. One thing to mention is that this aligns completely with the actions that are already proposed in our new community energy emissions plan, which we're going to be bringing out for consultation this summer and to council in the fall. But in terms of the capacity, at this stage, 35 local governments have, through their municipal councils, have endorsed Help Cities Lead. The signal we're getting from the province at a staff level is that having good momentum with local governments supporting this kind of gives that nudge for some of the stuff that's already mentioned in the mandate letters for the different ministries. That's a hopeful sign, I think, that an initiative like this can kind of push some of these things that we've been talking about for a number of years or advocating through our councils or UBCM resolutions, that we actually hit the mark finally at this point in time.
Wow, that's good. Any further questions? So do I have a mover for the recommendation? Move, second. So call the question, those in favor, oppose, motion carry. Okay, item number 7. Anything to
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing further to add to the report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any questions? Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair, the staff, I have a couple of questions on this one. I went through this one quite fine-tooth. So I guess the first question I think is important to consider the work that was done by the city to remove the cottonwood trees along River Road, the North Arm. Did that enact Federal Fisheries Act, habitat offsetting, or any federal or provincial compensation?
Through the Chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, it did. In both cases, one is a provincial policy for habitat enhancement, and also a DFO Fisheries Act for enhancement as well, for authorization to remove those riparian trees.
Perfect. Then I guess just to make sense of this document, so in addition to what the city will have to do in response to those two levels of government, this is to create our own city version of habitat enhancement. Is that correct?
Through the Chair to Councillor Wolf, yeah. The most recognizable program right now in the Lower Mainland is the Port Program for enhancement throughout the city and Lower Mainland. What this is essentially would establish is a program for the city to have the ability to accrue credits for future works. And that would be established through a systematic approach to enhancement projects that we would facilitate design and concept through a program like you've stated, through the capital program or any other public consultation period that we would have.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, just before I get to my questions, just another higher level or related to this. So if we're banking habitat, we could then use it for the federal or the provincial habitat compensation requirements. Is that correct?
Through the Chair to Councillor Wolf, this is a Federal Fisheries Act approval. If endorsed, the authorization for this program would facilitate the fisheries portion of this, so Fisheries Act, fish habitat. The provincial framework right now isn't the same framework, but this framework would satisfy the provincial requirements, which is currently a policy under the regulation.
Okay, thank you. That I'm getting better handle on it, and the fact that this is really our response to what would be FREMP if it came back, the Federal Fraser River Estuary Management Strategy or Plan. So thank you for that. Some specific questions from this then are, I guess I'll start on page 147. It mentions basically a description of FREMP there in the second paragraph. I'm just hoping, can we get a memo that includes the high value fish? I'm seeing the benefit or the leadership that the city can take here, that if we're actually going ahead with this level of compensation strategy, that perhaps we can help to bring FREMP back quicker because we have an actual document that is based on the previous FREMP document, but we can go and we have staff and residents who can see things and add to it and make it a more modernized document, and perhaps that will kickstart the port to doing what they're supposed to be doing. So anyway, maybe not a question there. But if we could get a document when it's available, if this passes, maybe it could be part of the next one. My next question is about the options here, and as staff recommend, it's basically there's 3 options on page 147 to 148, and the option that's being recommended is the third one, a fish habitat bank. So my question about that, 2 questions about that. Is it more like the net gain, like overall, is the habitat bank to gain in the end, or is it more like to do the no net loss?
Through the chair to Council Wolf, ultimately the credit is to replace the habitat that we want to displace. So it could be based on the objectives of our ecological network strategy or invasive species management plan or what have you. It could be any of the 3, depending on that approach and the project that's going to be proposed. But that's going to be developed down the line and have further consideration with those project specifications and in alignment with stakeholder and First Nation consultations down the road and if endorsed.
Okay, thank you. If I may, through the chair, just a few more questions, or unless Mr. Russell wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just, if I could, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to just further expand that these aren't options per se. We note them as scenarios. So all 3 of these tools are accessible to the city. What's unique about the bank is that we do need authority from the federal government. So to make that an available tool for the city, we would need council endorsement and to take those further steps. But the first and second scenario are still available to us. They're not options one way or the other.
Great. I really appreciate that. I think this is helpful for me and others, for both of you for sharing that. Thanks. Just a few other specific items then on the same page. So it does mention at the bottom of that same fish habitat bank section, talks about that the last sentence there is we would require a reliable funding source, likely a senior government funding source. So would we do we know when does that funding source already exist on an annual basis? Or would we be creating something new with this bank habitat bank arrangement? Is this easy to get, or is this a really big challenge?
Yeah, the level of funding, through the chair to Council Wolf, the level of funding noted there would be a constant or reliable city-funded force. For habitat restoration projects of this nature in the Lower Mainland, there aren't a lot of opportunities to get provincial and federal funding, because in a sense, the provincial and federal governments would be funding the loss of habitat. So in this sense, we would be looking at getting either capital funding or flood mitigation strategy funding that we have consistently, which could indirectly fund the project in the future.
Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Wolf, or Councillor Wolf as well, just to add to that, I guess what this will do for us effectively is allow us to start bringing forward specific restoration or habitat bank projects to council for consideration ahead of the projects that create their needs. So, by way of example, you might recall a few years back, we did the extensive road upgrades on Westminster and Nelson, and that was a grant-funded project assisted through the port and the federal government and the province. And an outcome of that project was a requirement to do habitat compensation that ultimately we created in Woodward Slough. And that compensation work was done subsequent to the substantial completion of the impacting project. So it's kind of an awkward situation when we try to scope a capital project like that. Sometimes it's uncertain what the cost is going to be for the compensation, and it happens separately in time. So we actually impact or remove the habitat and have that impact, and then at some later date, the compensation is created. So you have a net deficit through a period of time. With the implementation of this, we would create new habitat prior to removing or impacting the removed habitat. And so your net asset environmentally is at an increased level and doesn't see those dips. So, and as we get into some of the bigger diking improvement projects, some of these impacts will be quite extensive and large compared to what we've seen in the past decade. So we really see this as a key tool to really enhancing the overall environmental assets of the city while we improve our diking. And those projects would be funded ultimately, or eligible for funding through the drainage and diking utility. And ultimately, we're successful at getting quite a few grants for drainage and diking, and those in turn would help fund the environmental compensation projects.
Thank you very much. You've answered most of my other questions and things that I hadn't had come up yet, but you've got them. So my final questions then, maybe a little bit higher level again, will, if this is approved as is written, will this be part of the next item on the agenda's public stakeholder engagement program? Like, will the language for this be included when the public is asked about the scale and scope of the North Arm dike improvements and the habitat work and extra cost and time to put those elements in? Will that?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump straight in there through the chair to Council. Absolutely. And, we need to work through with the federal government approvals for the compensation in the bank. But our overall strategy as adopted by Council in the flood protection strategy is when we complete all the works for that, not only do we end up with improved flood protection, we end up with improved environmental assets across the city. And so, yes, going forward, any of these projects are going to be integrated with that. And we do the public consultation on the next item. Absolutely, this will be part of the conversation and the messaging.
Thank you. And through the chair, my very final question, I promise, is: do we have on staff wildlife biologists, habitat specialists that can provide long-term, ongoing quality work in addition or in replacement of many of the consultants that we have to reach out to? And I know they've done great work, but to have someone in-house with that position and knowledge and be able to carry through Richmond-specific biology and habitat enhancement work, as opposed to pulling experts who work in all these different areas that are very different from Richmond. So my question is, do we have someone on staff, or do we need to look into, if we're approving this tonight and going to council, that we also look into a habitat specialist for a future budget consideration? Thanks.
Yes, I'm sure Mr. Paulin has some answers on that, and we do have qualified people on staff, including Mr. Paulin and Mr. Russell. But absolutely, I mean, for a lot of compensation works to date, we use a QEP model. So there's a qualified environmental professional that becomes involved and does those site inspections and work in that level. But yes, when you look forward at the overall flood protection and diking upgrade plan that Council's approved to date and beyond, and the response we provided on the previous referral to the acceleration of that program, going forward, we'll be into multiple simultaneous capital projects for habitat compensation and construction, and we'll look at city force crews to do that construction. We'll have project managers do that, and absolutely environmental professionals as well. Once we kind of trip into a place where there's a defined need for staff on an ongoing, long-term, full-time basis, that's where it starts to make sense to have those people in-house versus hiring consultants.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you, through the chair.
Good. Well, I think staff also mentioned in the report that there might be a need for further staff resources in the future. Any further questions on this? Okay, before we move to motion, I want to ask staff for one clarification, or maybe two. For the fish habitat bank, I just want to know, do we have any examples so that we know what we're talking about? We are talking about the same thing, and we know what we are recommending. So can staff provide some information about an example of this fish habitat bank?
Through the chair, just for clarification, an example of the fish habitat bank itself is in the form of an agreement, and that agreement would be something that we would negotiate with the federal government if endorsed, and we would bring that back to council when the terms would be close to being finished. We would have an example of that agreement, but the fish habitat bank itself is in the form an agreement with the federal government.
Yes, I know, but
Mr. Chair, if I could add, I think I can respond to your question. A good example would be Port of Vancouver operates a fish bank. Recently, you might be aware of their intention to create the Stevenson Jetty Marsh, and that is part of their compensation program through a habitat bank they have authority to execute. And that would be done in advance of an approval of the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 if it is approved. Either way, their projects do affect the environment, and that bank is intended, and they operate it as such, to offset those impacts. So that would be a local example.
very good, yes, so that we know what we're talking about. And secondly, now, if you look at the staff recommendation, staff make the recommendation item number 1, and then it goes with sub-items A, B, and C. But I don't see a number 2. So, is something missing? Staff recommendation 1, that is described in staff report, blah, 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 and then it goes with A, B, and C. But there's no item 2. So, do we left out something, or, we should renumber the recommendation?
The recommendation is not. Yeah.
I believe it's. You're correct, Mr. Chair. There, there shouldn't be a 1 there.
Okay, so maybe just cross out the 1. Okay. Okay, good. So do I have a mover? Move. Second. Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item 8. Any further update? I mean, any new information?
Mr. Chair, I have nothing further.
Question? Michael?
Thank you. Through the chair to staff. Another one I'm very familiar with, so I went into a bit of detail on this one. So just a couple of questions. So I use this route sometimes twice a day. And so I've heard a lot since being a resident in Hamilton about issues along this route. So just a couple of questions. And so the first one is on, I'll just say that I really support the recommended approach that staff have in the report on page 154. It starts the description of the separated dike and road, and seeing the the current project on the South Dike and hearing some of the concerns people have had about how it's so narrow. I really like the idea that we plan for that full separation where there's vehicle traffic and separated for cycle, pedestrian shared, and cycle lane as well. I think that's going to be the way to go. My next comment then, I guess, is a question out of this one. The habitat enhanced, I'm thinking there's potential there for, on page 158, the Northeast Bog Forest. It's listed in that table on the non-standard sections. I'm curious, has there been any considerations for that area to become a tidally influenced slough? So as we just recently had the approval in Terra Nova, and further in this report, in the consultant's report, it goes into details of what Tree Island Slough could become. But that's, I think of, well, maybe not a bigger project, but to open up part of the Northeast Bog project, if we're already improving the road over it, just west of the train bridge, then perhaps there is ability to, at high tide, allow natural water flow into that area as well, if we're really trying to enhance the feature of the Northeast Bog. So do you know if staff have considered any potential tidally influenced breach or asked consultants to look at that area?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, no, we haven't reviewed that option. That kind of detail we'd be looking at kind of determining as we get further into reviewing each of these sections through the design.
Okay, great. Then I'll keep watch on that. And on page 162, or in our package near the top, near the middle top, it mentions a phase 4 video that staff created. Is that something new that was recently circulated, or is that a previous one?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, that is a new video that's been recently developed. So we will circulate that for council's information in the future.
Okay, thanks. Then through the chair, just a few more here. Just the page right before this, on page 161, it mentions that, like we just did a few minutes ago, it says staff are seeking council's endorsement to establish a fish habitat bank arrangement. So I'm pleased that the staff brought these two reports together and worked on them in tandem, and staff, multiple staff involved in coordinating this, because I think that's a very important piece. I was a little bit concerned when I was reading these earlier that we should not approve the Dike Master Plan Phase 4 until the habitat enhancement is approved by council, and then consider this. But I think they are designed to work really well together. So at this current stage now, I don't think we should delay this phase of public and stakeholder engagement, because I know there's a lot more work to come related to this. Thank you. And through the chair, just a few more questions then to staff. This goes now into the consultant's report, and I'm not sure if they are here or staff can answer just a couple of questions I was going to bring up from reading through this. So the first one is on our page 176 tree, and it mentions this is the ID number 6, Tree Island, Slough, and Boundary. I just wanted to provide the comment. I know there's lots of different examples of how that might work in and around the Hamilton Transit Center. But my question is, or comment as well, is could we work to open up a public accessible trail behind the Hamilton Transit Center? Because as far as I know, the buses don't become aqua buses, so they don't need access to the river. And with the dike upgrade there, we could allow pedestrian use. So there's already a trail where River Road connects to Westminster Highway out in Hamilton. There is a trail extension that goes along the river, but then it ends at the Hamilton Transit Center. And if you walk through blackberries or walk along the riprap, you could get around it, but then you're stuck in the wedge between Tree Island and Hamilton Transit Center. So are staff aware of a potential trail access route that could be go around the back of Hamilton Transit Center?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, those are details we'll be hashing out as we get further into the process. The intent of the dike upgrades is not only to achieve protection, but also significant environmental enhancement as well as public amenities. So that certainly fits into that concept.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Just to the chair, just a couple more places. So if others on council or committee wanted to look into that area that I was just referring to, page 213 and 214 are the maps that kind of show where the Hamilton Transit Center is and where Tree Island is, and that slough in between is my final question, which is best described on the next page, 215, and that area in green would show that that the dike would potentially in this option close off a major fish habitat area that already exists. So I like the idea of habitat fish banks, but I also don't want to have us disturb existing habitat. We really need to be creating new habitat, not altering existing. So again, a reason why I think the habitat bank project is important, but again, yeah, just a concern, I guess, that I don't want us to be doing something majorly devastating that costs a lot of damage and funding when we could have easier successes elsewhere. But I'm glad this was in the report. I've always looked at it and considered what could be done to make this even better, and perhaps our team can get there in the future. So those are all my questions on that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Carol?
Thank you very much. Well, I don't know what it is about dike reports, but I always find them so incredibly interesting. I just wanted to, I can't believe that since 2010 that we've raised $40 million in grants. That's just absolutely outstanding, and give yourself a pat on the back. I just want to say that whenever we do a dike improvement, I like when we go a little bit further and improve the infrastructure for cycling, walking, and cars, because while we're at it, we might as well make the waterfront of Richmond more accessible than it has been in previous years. So is that something we do kind of matter of fact, or is it something we can only do when the funds are available?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, certainly with these dike upgrade projects, it presents the opportunity for us to look into those options. And wherever it makes sense, we take advantage of those opportunities to gain environmental features as well as public amenities for this.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I'll just add to that as well. Absolutely. I think, our experience over the last 10 and 20 years, and as we've achieved greater focus on the challenges with sea level rise and climate change, and as we do some of these bigger dike raising projects, we come to the realization you need to address a whole bunch of issues. And if you're going to go in and have the impact environmentally, do the compensation and all that, provide the full long-term solution. And yes, address all of those transportation issues, park trail access issues, build it in the way that will make you successful in all those elements for the long term. That's certainly what we're seeing, and that's certainly what we're hoping to achieve with this master plan and other ones in the future.
That's just wonderful, because when people can see the work that's being done, appreciate it, and understand why it's being done, it helps educate the public. So well done. Thank you.
Good. Any further questions? So do I have a move of the recommendation? Move. Second. Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carry. Item number 9, specialty crosswalks. Alexa, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I'd like to make a referral to staff to give options on a policy for approving, funding, consultation, design, and installation of specialty crosswalks. So that's my motion.
Okay.
If I can,
Second.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, now I'll speak to it.
Sure.
So we've received already 2 requests, one from Tomakiji Homa and one from Steve's Elementary School, Manoa Steve's, and they've both asked for rainbow crosswalks. It occurs to me that we should probably have a process by which we consider it, we approve it, we have some sort of neighborhood consultation, we partner maybe with the school board either on funding or at least make sure that the school board's on board for this. We know that, specialty crosswalks could have some people not want them in their neighborhood or in front of their school or whatever, what have you. We saw the contention around SOGI, so certainly we don't want to foist a specialty crosswalk onto a school and then have them deal with it. On the other hand, I think the crosswalks, we've seen that the Indigenous one over on 70th and Granville that looks quite nice, it's quite interesting. I think there's opportunities within specialty crosswalks for maybe communities to come together to design something that they'd like in their community that helps bring them together, whatever that is. So I think there should be some sort of a process by which we decide whether or not they're going to have them and what the process is, so it's easy for them to understand what it is they're asking for and why this process is in place, and then how the funding for it works. So, if it's in a school, maybe it makes sense. Maybe we do a cost share with the school. Maybe we pay for the whole thing and we're willing to do that. But we should also have a funding mechanism for these. They're not free. They're not terribly expensive, but they're also not free. And so how many do we want in our community? Where do we want them? Where is it appropriate? Where is it not appropriate? Certainly we've picked one spot, but we're starting to see more and more from the schools that the kids are wanting them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the parents are on board or anything else. So I think we just need staff to help us create some sort of a policy, some sort of procedure, and do it in conjunction with the school board so that, there's no surprise. I think there's also opportunities too for, say, the religious communities down 5 Road to have some sort of ecumenical one, but there has to be some sort of process to decide which designs would be appropriate or acceptable, and then how those are chosen. So I think it's just get out ahead of this, come up with some sort of policy procedure that we can look at, agree on, vote on.
Okay. Further, any comments, questions? Yeah, I definitely support that we should have a process, and also we should have a policy. And that's actually one of the questions that I raised when we talk about the first rainbow crosswalk that we have outside of the library. And I also would like staff to look into other jurisdictions, see if there's any cities having some kind of a policy on this, so that we can choose from different options. Okay, so if no further comments, I will ask ask the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, manager's report. But before the reports, Michael, you have the 2 additions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'll be and committee. I'll be brief. So number 10A, the blackberry trimming. I just noticed it again today. So city crews, public works trucks out along Westminster Highway and removing blackberry that was growing onto the trail, multi-use pathway along Westminster Highway. It's like between 6 Road and 8 Road. My question is, if the origin of the plant is not on city land and it grows onto city land and we cut it, is it just a city expense? Is this somehow cost shared with the owner of it? I know we've talked in other regards to sidewalks and if the plant is on the owner's property line, but it bubbles out into the city space, and they don't cut it, then we cut it and we charge them. How does it work in the area I referred to, which I believe is ALR, and then likely the plant originates on ALR land and goes into the city?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf. So I'm not familiar with the exact location of the cutting that you mentioned today, but typically vegetation is pruned to property line regardless of how it originates. And if it's blackberries on streetscapes, it's primarily complaint driven is my understanding. So in this case, I'm assuming it was complaint driven, maybe restricting visibility, access, etc. So staff would come in that as part of our program.
Thanks. And just to follow up to the chair, because I didn't complain about it this year on the Bike to Work Week, but last year I did, because the blackberry was coming right in and half that trail couldn't even be used because of blackberry. And I just know that method with blackberry, cutting it to a property line, it's very happy with growing right back and even further the next year. So, and then it's just costing our staff and minimizing our accessibility as a public to use our paths and trails. So, I'm not sure if we can look into, at least in some of the more problematic areas, addressing some of the blackberry at the roots. And then I don't know if it would be the city staff going into the properties to do that. If this is something that we can just have direction for staff to investigate, perhaps better methodology around some of these invasive species management areas?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, this vegetation, similar to a tree, wherever it originates is private property. We can't trespass. We would be trespassing on private property. So it would be where ultimately we would be engaging with the resident or the private property owner to ultimately assist in properly managing in this case, blackberry to the root or to the ground level, which would then assist us in the future.
Okay. Maybe Ms. Bycroft.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we do have the Boulevard Protection Bylaw, the Boulevard Maintenance Bylaw, and inspections are done by our bylaw officers, and where growth from a property has extended onto the sidewalk, we will send a letter to the homeowner advising them of their responsibility to trim that to ensure there is access for pedestrians to be able to use those walkways. And failing to do that, we advise them that the city will facilitate that work and bill it back to the property owner.
Appreciate that. Thank you both for the response there. I know some of these properties, there's been for sale signs up, and clearly no one's living on some of them. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's the end of that item. I'm not sure if anyone else on committee wanted to comment on that item. If not, I'll just carry on to item 10B. This one, I know I think all members of council received some of the comments related to washroom signage on some of our trails and public areas. I know this is not a Parks and Rec meeting, but I thought it would also fit for Public Works because it's our trucks who go to service these buildings and probably manage the signage on them. And so I bring this up as I know I've heard and I've experienced it when there's two specific gendered washrooms and someone of your gender is using the washroom, you wait and you don't use the one that's been empty for a long time, and maybe the person is in your washroom and they're planning to stay there for a longer time, and the awkwardness of using the other washroom and then someone comes. So anyway, could we not put in the few locations, and maybe staff can comment how many of these potential problem sites do we have where there's just two stalls in a small building and there's a male and a female sign on the door. For example, I talked at the Richmond Nature Park Committee the other day, and their outdoor washrooms don't have genders on them. Or sorry, they do. They have a male, a female, and a family one in the middle. And then indoors, the washrooms are both non-gender. So, yeah, I'm not sure if staff are aware of this, or did someone from Public Works looking to correct a couple locations with signage, or does it fit somewhere else?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, your timing's impeccable. We're actually, as part of some of the new washrooms we're looking to design right now, we're actually having this conversation as we speak. How do we move forward with gender identification or not in this case, and provide more accessible access to these facilities? So as part of that, we're also looking at our existing washrooms and saying, can we either remove gender-specific signage or make some level of adjustment? So we are looking into that, and that is part of it, is to look at the inventory of what we have, what areas can we do this, and what areas are we somewhat restricted on.
Very good.
Then, yeah, thank you. Just one comment on that then, unless someone else from committee wanted to ask or comment. I know many of us went on a tour of the, where is it now? In Surrey, the community center they were building, the Passive House Standard. I can't remember the name of that community. But anyway, the washroom facilities indoor, they were all individual cubicle stalls, and they were all non-gender, and there was a central washing area. I'm not sure how many staff on this meeting were there, but yeah, I think that it's very positive to hear that you're approaching it for new facilities and existing. So those are my comments, and I don't need any other referrals by the sounds of it, so thank you very much.
Okay, so any other managers report? Yeah, okay, Mr. Lin.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Through the chair, just a quick update on the traffic calming measures proposed on Shell Road East, south of Williams Road. In total, there will be 2 raised crosswalks and 1 new speed hump that will be constructed. This is in response to a petition that we received last year. Neighborhood residents were surveyed, and there was a strong support, with 87% of the respondents indicated their support. The measures are funded out of the existing capital program, and the construction will start this week.
Okay. Any question on that? Alexa?
Is there any update on the intersection at Shell and Williams itself? I think that was supposed to happen pretty soon too. So I know last week there was a bad accident there. Everything was being rerouted. Wondering if there's anything happening with the interest, when that's coming forward, because I know we approved something like 800,000 for it or something, and I think we saw it in a capital budget. I just can't remember when it's supposed to start.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, my understanding is that the work is imminent. Perhaps the next speaker, Bill Johal, will be able to provide more up-to-date information on the construction work.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Liu, we sent out construction notices last week to begin construction for 2 traffic signals, one at Sheldon Williams East and one at Sheldon Williams West. And we're also working with CN Rail to install railway
Sorry,
gates.
you're breaking up on me. I can't hear you.
Sorry. We're also working with CN Rail to install railway gates and flashers as well. Was that okay? Is that clear? Or
I got part of it, but okay, it's happening.
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We're hoping to complete the project by March 2022.
Okay, and when does it start again, please?
The traffic signal work is starting this summer.
This summer. Okay, thanks.
Okay, are there further reports?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one additional update. As part of the traffic intersection camera project, the city has installed new cameras at 4 intersections on Westminster Highway between Nelson Road and Fraserwood Place. So this brings the total number of traffic camera intersections to 116 out of 180 traffic signals. And this also begins phase 3 of the camera project, which is anticipated to proceed for multiple years in conjunction with the expansion of the fiber optic cable network.
Okay, very good. Any questions on this? No, seeing none. Any further manager's report? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn? Move, second. Call the questions in favor, opposed, motion carry. So meeting is adjourned. Thank you.